My experience is defined by growing up as a person of color, as so many of our communities experience gun violence on a daily basis, and that violence often isn't talked about. It's violence that is overlooked because it doesn't make headlines. We are uniquely positioned on the front lines of this effort to be able to fight back against the lack of representation and criminalization that happens in the media and in the way that these forms of violence are talked about. Oftentimes it's uncomfortable for us as gun violence prevention advocates to talk about fight against police brutality, gun violence that happens at the hands of law enforcement. So many times where we go to the ballot, or we do so with law enforcement and with the support of law enforcement. But I think that's what uniquely positions this movement to address that intersection. I also think in this fight we have to address the way that the gun violence affects communities disproportionately. It's one of the things that made me so proud to be on the team of youth fellows on Initiative 1639, is that the Alliance in particular used the platform that we have to uplift the voices of students of color who were at the center of the legislation that we were trying to get passed. And that mission is one of the best things that we can do as a movement to make sure that these disproportionate and different effects are addressed.
One of the things that we're most proud of at the Alliance was last year we passed a bill that established the first of its kind statewide Office of Firearm Safety and Violence Prevention. This office is groundbreaking because it will use research and data collection to inform community-based solutions and really center the violence that happens disproportionately in our Black and Brown communities that has devastating impacts on young Black and Brown men and the communities that surround them.
You have to do research, you have to collect data, you have to be able to identify in which communities we're seeing gun violence. And we have to be able to identify individuals around that community, and we have to do preventative work.
One of the most exciting and potentially impactful elements of the new office is a grants program that will be giving grants to community-based solutions. And these solutions are organizations that have been working on the ground with violence prevention, intervention, and interruption. They know what their communities need, and now we have state funding to help support that.
All the data tells us that young people who have been impacted by gun violence are likely to be the ones who are impacted again as someone who's harming or someone else who's being harmed. And that's the heart of our cause at Choose 180. We employ folks with lived experience that engage young people in community at critical moments of their lives and help them pause, pivot, and commit to a new direction. So instead of being engaged in the criminal legal system, young people get community. Instead of running around feeling guilty, young people receive grace. And instead of being viewed as a problem, young people are viewed as a possibility and given the resources they need to truly live into who it is they see themselves as. And that's the heart of our cause at Choose 180. Our organization intentionally engages young people at critical moments in their lives where things could go really, really poorly if they don't get the appropriate engagement from someone who's able to see them as they are and not as what they've done. But what we must do is understand that the disease of violence doesn't see race. The disease of violence does, although, flourish in certain social and economic conditions. And in those conditions that have been created by a history of racism in America, there are people who are Black and brown that are disproportionately impacted. And because of that, we have to respond accordingly and look at the numbers and look at the data and look at where handgun violence is impacting people in our country and respond accordingly with the same zeal and enthusiasm as we do when there's a mass shooting that manifests itself in a horrific way. I've never been in the midst of a mass shooting. I've never lost a family member to a mass shooting, but I have lost an uncle to gun violence, friends to gun violence, young people to gun violence. And as I begin to look over the course of my life and add up each one of those numbers, not one of them are less significant than the many lives that are lost at the moment of a mass shooting.